Hey folks, Sunjiro here. Thank you for joining me for today's tutorial. Very briefly, I just wanted to mention that I'm going to be doing things a bit differently with this video, and hopefully from here on out. I've really enjoyed making these, and it seems like they're helping people, so I'm going to be taking them a bit more seriously. There will also be a bit more diverse content. Well, I already upload weird art projects and these tutorials, but I'll also create some video essays and some more personal content about me for those of y'all interested in this weird android alien that you've been watching. If the videos I'm making are helping or interesting you, please consider liking, subscribing, and commenting here or on Patreon. You can find the link in the description. Anyhow, with that out of the way, today I'll be covering a topic that's been quite a game changer for me when it comes to my use of sonicpi. Using sonicpi with the Visual Studio Code editor. I'm going to start off with this video from a bit of a theoretical angle, but if you're interested in jumping right into how to use VS Code with sonicpi, feel free to jump in to the timestamp on the screen. And with that, sometimes I have difficulty explaining to people what sonicpi actually is. It's technically a live coding environment that uses the Ruby language. That is to say, it is a program, like an integrated development environment or IDE, that uses a variant of Ruby for people to make music. But that feels off in some ways, right? On one hand, what does that mean to a non-technical person? When I'm pitching a performance to a venue, that answer doesn't really mean anything to someone who isn't in the interactive media arts world. On another hand, I feel like this overemphasizes the importance of Ruby. I didn't know any Ruby before learning sonicpi, and I don't know that I could create something using Ruby now with just my sonicpi experience. And on the third hand, and the most important hand for us in this particular conversation, sonicpi as an environment is made up of a lot of individual components that work well together, but in truth can be used separately. sonicpi has a synth engine, SuperCollider, that makes the sounds that you hear when using synth functions. It has a robust built-in help system with examples, documentation, and a massive library for the language. It has the GUI that most people interact with to use sonicpi. It has ports for MIDI and OSC, and yes, it has the Ruby interpreter. But what I'm trying to get at is that that's only one part of the larger picture. I guess to answer the question that I posed a bit earlier, I normally explain sonicpi like an instrument. It has a logic to make sounds, based in Ruby, like the way a guitar and piano can both play a C note, but a guitar has tabs or finger positions that you can learn that don't necessarily translate to using piano. I think this is important to note given that there are other music coding instruments, like sonicpi, that operate on a different logic that can be as similar to sonicpi as a guitar is to a bass, or as dissimilar as a guitar and a didgeridoo. So you can tell this hypothetical venue, sonicpi is a music coding instrument, and if they understand or are interested in learning more, you can expand and give them this whole spiel, or just send them this video. Like an instrument, sonicpi also has what we'll call here material components, like the things I mentioned earlier, the UI, the synth engine, etc., similar to how a guitar has a body, a fretboard, a headstop. So the tutorial for today is kind of like modding your sonicpi instrument, swapping out the strings for another way to play, but still keeping the bulk of the instrument and maintaining all of the same logic. Meaning you won't have to learn a new language to use the benefit of these new quote-unquote strings. We will be using Visual Studio Code here, but I should note that it is possible for you to use sonicpi with other editors as well. I've seen posts where people have talked about using sonicpi with Vim, Atom, and the command line, but I personally use VS Code for my other coding projects and really enjoy the editor, and so I was thrilled to find out that it was possible to use VS Code to control sonicpi. While I love sonicpi, I feel like the UI leaves a lot to be desired. It can be really tough to find what you're looking for when you have hundreds of lines of code and no ability to search. And God forbid you ever need to change the name of a variable or function. Personally, I always worry about the safety of leaving things in the buffer, and I'm always wishing I had more buffers available. And the same frustration around how hard it is to find things in the code also goes for the console lag. SonicPi was originally designed as a teaching tool to help people learn how to code, and for that purpose, it's amazing. I absolutely love the help system, for example, but VS Code really makes for a much more professional and robust experience, in my opinion. Some of the benefits that I found for using VS Code are the ability for you to control find things inside of the code and in the console. On the code side, this is great, not just because you can find things, but you can also easily find and replace large swaths of text at the same time using the code swap. For example, if you wanted to change all of the variables named orange to banana. In the console, this find function also helps you see at a glance how frequently your term appears. Next, I really love the ability for you to save and use the file explorer. This may seem like a tiny thing, especially given that you can save in SonicPi, but I just really love the Explorer view. It makes it really easy to navigate the different projects I'm working on and sort things into different categories. For example, I can have a folder for all of my generative SonicPi compositions, and another folder where those are adapted for performances. Folding code blocks are a game changer that I didn't realize I needed until I had them. I have projects that are nearing 500 lines of code. Even with the ability to search, this gets pretty overwhelming quite quickly. I use folding code blocks all the time, not just for the code itself, but I also find that I comment my code much more now that these comments can be hidden and won't clog my view when I'm in the flow. Lastly, I love the ability for you to add or customize the theme of the view. While for me, this is mostly a vanity thing, this can be a real game changer for people who get light-activated migraines. I've seen quite a few folks in forums talk about how SonicPi's native editor themes trigger their light sensitivity, both in light and dark modes. That makes it very hard to use, sometimes even impossible. The ability to use your own themes makes SonicPi that much more accessible. However, I think I should also note that VS Code isn't necessarily for everyone. While it works really well for my particular workflow, I have seen reports that using the SonicPi server with VS Code doesn't work as well and can cause glitches for people using the native synth engine. I almost never use SonicPi's synth engine personally, opting instead to use SonicPi to send MIDI data to my DAW, which is a whole video for another day, so I can't confirm or deny this. But if you switch to VS Code and experience this, just know that you're not alone. I can, however, speak to my sadness or disappointment at not having access to the Lang tab in VS Code the way that you do in the native editor. Whereas the VS Code extension has examples that you can run in the editor, and you can find the bulk of the documentation for SonicPi online, the information in the Lang tab, as far as I've found, can only be found in SonicPi natively. And so usually, when I'm starting a new project and really experimenting before honing in on a final idea, I'll often have the SonicPi editor open on another screen, just to browse through that tab. If you found the information in the Lang tab somewhere else online or in the SonicPi files, please let me know in the comments. Now for why we're all here. Running SonicPi through Visual Studio Code. It's actually quite a straightforward process. First, you want to install SonicPi. It's important to note that the version of SonicPi that you have is quite important, which I'll get into in a bit, but for now, I'll just say that at the time of making this video, I'm using SonicPi version 4.50.0. You can get this version of SonicPi by going to the SonicPi repository on GitHub, going to the releases page, finding the correct version, and then clicking the link associated with your specific operating system. Or you can just click the link in the description, which will take you to the specific release. Next, you'll want to download Visual Studio Code, which works for Windows, Mac, and Linux. Head to the VS Code download page, also in the description, and you can download the version that works for your operating system. Once that's downloaded, you'll want to open it up, go to the extensions in the sidebar, and search for SonicPi. Now, here's why it's important for you to have a specific version of SonicPi. As you can see, there are a few SonicPi extensions available here in the Visual Studio Code extension marketplace. Part of why I'm making this video at all is because I tried almost every SonicPi extension available here, as well as one on GitHub that's not listed here, before finally finding one that works with newer, at the time of making this video, versions of SonicPi. For me, the version that works is SonicPi extension by 0.00500. I don't know how much they maintain this version, but as of speaking, it supports versions 4 and above, whereas most of the other extensions stopped being maintained at a certain point and don't work with the newer releases. Once you've gone ahead and installed the sonicpi extension, you may need to go into your settings, search sonicpi, and paste the directory where you installed sonicpi into the extension that says vscode-sonic-pi:\sonicpi root directory. But, like it says there in the settings, only do this if the default option doesn't work for you. If things are configured correctly, sonicpi should now be working. You can save files as .pi or create new files as .pi, and the server should automatically boot up when you open them, and you can make those sweet coded beats. But I also wanted to give you a little bit of a bonus here, something purely aesthetic. See, after I had been using VS Code for a while, I really began to miss the look of the native sonicpi editor. That shade of pink is easily my favorite color, and I was quite used to the syntax coloring for functions, variables, numbers, etc. Sometimes, during my performances, I play with these colors to give an interesting view to audiences as well. So I wanted to replicate that sonicpi look in VS Code. After trying to manually set the color theme using JSON in VS Code's settings, which felt like an impossible task, I discovered Theme Studio for VS Code, and found it so much easier to recreate that familiar interface. It still took maybe an hour or more to do, but luckily I did the labor so that you don't have to. You can find the link to that theme I made in the description. If you're interested in using it, honestly, the people behind Theme Studio for VS Code made a really great explainer video with accompanying text instructions, so I'd recommend just clicking that link in the description and following their instructions, but here's a quick summary for you here as well. Go to the page for the theme that I made and click install. Once you've installed it, open the JSON file and copy the whole token colors array. Open your settings.json file in VS Code. Add the text that you currently see on the screen. Replace the empty text-mate rules array with the array that you copied from the theme's JSON file. Go back to the theme JSON and copy the colors object. Open settings.json again and add the text you see on the screen. Make the value the colors object that you copied, save the settings, and the new theme should now be active. A quick side note, if you dig the theme that I made, but you want to change some things, for example, you want all the pink elements to be green, you can actually fork my theme on Theme Studio for VS Code. But be sure to start while you're there. And that's it. That is a full explainer on getting sonicpi to not only work in VS Code, but even get VS Code to look like sonicpi for a smoother transition. I've found that I make much more work with sonicpi now that I'm using this editor. And it's also changed the kind of work that I make. Whereas before, I used to make relatively simple compositions using basic live loops for performance, now I make quite complex work, generative pieces that can play forever with lots of variation and little human intervention required, or that I can manipulate live much more easily with the ability to search and fold code. I've started experimenting with more complex ideas like phrase controllers that control universal variables and MIDI CC controllers that act as LFOs. Things that are possible using the native editor, but become difficult to deal with when you've got a lot of code going on. I mean, just check out the difference between the Earthseed and the equanimous equation transmissions on my channel, and you'll see what I mean. Anyway, I hope that you found this video helpful and that you have a great experience with VS Code and sonicpi. I'd love to see what you create, so be sure to comment links below to your work. And if you found this video helpful or engaging, please engage back. Comment, like, and subscribe here or on Patreon. Peace to all sentient beings. Shinjiro, signing off.